Hello. Let's see. Looks like the microphone is working. If anyone is in chat, just let me know that you can hear me okay, because I have to turn my volume off. I want to give everyone a little time to be able to join in. All right. So I'm getting a green light. I'm hoping the audio is working. I'm going to go ahead and begin, but if anybody wants to let me know if it's working or not, just giving me a thumbs up in chat, that would be really helpful. So let me go ahead and get started. This video is going to be about understanding emotions. This is very important because whether we understand emotions or not, they tend to rule our lives. So understanding them is kind of a leveling up in life. And it will allow you to succeed at being where you want to be and avoiding where you don't want to be. But I first want to go into understanding emotions themselves. So, what are emotions? The nature of emotions are energy. Now, everything in our experience essentially is energy. That energy is expressed via vibrations. And the vibrations are then identified as patterns in our mind, which create certain feelings, sensations, thought waves about those patterns. That is the root of where our ego begins to form the narratives, which we then attach to and experience our lives through. But just to demonstrate how emotions are purely vibrational, I'm going to use my ukulele here. And what I want you to do is close your eyes while I play a chord and just kind of feel into what sensations that chord gives to your body, or what that chord feels like to you, what emotion it's communicating to you. So we'll start here. And again. And then I'm going to play another chord while you keep your eyes closed, and I want you to feel how that chord feels in your body, what sensations, thoughts, or images arise. And again. And then lastly, I'm going to play one more chord with your eyes closed to feel how this chord, what sensations come about. And so, if you were feeling into your body with those chords, you can kind of sense that the first chord that I played maybe feels like sadness, or feels a little down, feels a little heavy. Maybe you had different images that remind you of that feeling. The second chord I played maybe gave you a little bit more hope, a little energy, a little feelings of lightness. And the last chord I played perhaps gave feelings of tension, maybe anxiety, uncertainty. And so these feelings that are coming about that you might feel as a result of these notes, it's important to see that you are not the note that is being played. The note that is being played is the vibration, is the communication. But the way that the note makes you feel is the story, is the attachment, is the things that come about, that arise in consciousness as a result of this stimulation. So, unfortunately, what happens with emotions in our lives is that we have these stories. Hi, everyone. Hi, Eddie. Hi, Olga. We have these stories that we forget are not us. So, the emotion, the sensation is akin to the note that is being played. We attach to that and convince ourselves with the stories and cycles of thoughts that we are that note instead of object recognizing the note itself and becoming aware of where the note is on the scale. Let's say the E minor, the note that makes you feel sadness, is here, and a C, a C major, is here. And the sensations and images and thoughts and things that arise when you're in that E minor feeling, or the stories you have around them, maybe isn't exactly where you want to be in your life, whatever your circumstances are. Maybe you recognize, oh, I just feel heavy, or I feel tired, or I don't want to feel this way. So, in that, you can look directly at the emotion itself and detach or dissolve the stories around it. So you can move higher up on the scale. It's kind of effortless. And then maybe find attachments or practices, habits, thoughts that help solidify that higher note, that feeling of peace or joy. So, more or less, these stories are condensed into the experience, which is the character or identity that we identify with. There may be many in different people at different times based on different things. But any of those stories are essentially resistance to what is. What is the E minor or the A major or the C major. What is vibration and energy. What isn't is the stories and attachments that we build around and mistakenly identify ourselves as. We'll get a little bit more into that later, but I just want to kind of give you a baseline of what emotions essentially really are at the root, which is vibration and a transmission of energy. So what happens when we build these stories and we have these characters and we attach to the emotion is it really wreaks havoc on our energetic system, because we as beings are not meant to hold and covet these vibrations, this energy. We are essentially like instruments. We are meant to experience the energy coming into us and allow it to flow and express itself out of us. In becoming a fine tuned instrument and allowing the emotions to move through you rather than holding on to them, desperately clinging like the ego tends to do, we feel an ease in life. We take things less personally. We don't tend to get caught up in the narratives of the ego. We just allow the energy to move through us. What will happen if we don't do that is essentially disease will manifest in the body because energy is being trapped in certain areas and we're not able to release it or understand what's happening, or we experience confusion or cyclical thoughts that never stop, insomnia, we can't sleep, we have racing thoughts, or we feel disoriented, we feel tired. So it is really important. It's a big like leveling up to understand the nature of emotions, each one individually, so that you can look at it and face it directly and deal with it so that the stories around it naturally dissolve and you effortlessly move up the scale. So I'm going to go through each of these common emotions. I feel like they're very common emotions, and kind of build a little bit of a picture. So we're going to take the emotion itself, and then I'm going to explain how the emotion tends to express itself outwardly to the world and what that looks like. So you can begin to recognize the thoughts and feelings and experiences that happen as a result of this root emotion, and how the emotion expresses itself inwardly. Because remember, it's just energy. Energy is either moving into you, moving out of you, it's constantly moving and transforming. And then after we take the emotion and look at how it expresses outwardly and inwardly, so we can identify the emotion itself, I want to point you to the seed of the thing that gives rise to that particular emotion. And this is just kind of creating space between you and the emotion, to see how it works, what it does, look at the man behind the curtain, so to speak. And I'll talk a little bit more about practices that you can use to enhance that ability to create space. So the first emotion I want to talk about is disgust. It's a very common emotion. Um, Disgust tends to express itself inwardly as self-hate. So maybe you don't like the way you look, or you hate that mole that you have, or you don't like the way you talk, or the way you act, or even the way you feel. You're constantly picking yourself apart, and there's a lot of self-hatred. This is what disgust does inwardly. When disgust is expressed outwardly, it tends to present itself as arrogance. So you're very judging of other people, and you're, oh, I don't like how this person does that, or the way this person looks, or whatever. So it's the same energy, which is disgust. It's just going one of two ways. And the seed of disgust is rejection. So rejecting that which is, rejecting things in yourself, rejecting things in others, and therefore finding them unappealing, being disgusted. But the emotion is disgust. So it's a really common one, but it's a little bit insidious. And before I continue on, I do want to kind of mention that a lot of people tend to, or I found many people who are able to completely disassociate from experiencing any emotion at all. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but this essentially is someone who's so fearful of any feeling in general, probably have had some kind of trauma in childhood, that they're so fearful to even identify that emotions exist at all, that they're not willing to even look at any of them, which seems like sometimes a good idea when there's a lot of unpleasant emotions, but it really, really wreaks havoc to be someone who's just disassociated, who just refuses to look at any emotion. And the underlying root there is fear, but we'll talk more on that. So the second emotion I want to bring up is sadness. This is a very obvious one that all of us experience. It's very loud and difficult to ignore. The emotion of sadness tends to express itself inwardly as self-pity or despair. And this might be, poor me, everybody else, nobody understands me. No one's ever going to love me. I'm just a poor, unfortunate person. It's very hopeless. And the outward expression of sadness is disassociation. So that might look like nobody else in the world is like me. Nobody has the capacity to understand me. I'm different than everybody. Um, yeah, I'm always going to be alone. These are the kinds of things we disassociate ourselves. Like nothing else could ever possibly get us out of that sadness. And the seed of the sadness is hurt, which is very common, or lack. So feeling like whatever is happening to you in life, you don't have enough. You're never going to be enough. Or hurt can be just pain. Feeling rejected, or feeling wanting a connection or wanting love and not getting it. So the next major emotion, we're starting with the lower emotions and we're going to move up, is fear. This is a really, really big one. Fear is very insidious. It's attached to our survival mechanism. Fear as an emotion tends to express itself inwardly as anxiety. So this is probably very obvious. Your heart races, you feel nervousness, you feel restlessness, you're afraid of interaction or afraid of going outside. Sometimes it can be really bad. And then outwardly, fear expresses itself as control. So this is just, again, trying to be able to manage the environment or the circumstances so that you can not feel afraid. And the seed of fear, so that which underlies and gives rise to fear, is survival and the loss of connection. So connection is essentially what our survival depends on from the time we're infants. And if we don't have that connection, it's experienced as a threat to our survival. And so this gives rise to the emotion of fear. So the next, we'll say, negative or unpleasant emotion that we're going to talk about is anger. Anger is also a very obvious and loud one, and impossible in some cases to ignore. So anger as an emotion inwardly expresses itself as depression. So it's something that isn't always seen as being attached to anger. You might think that depression is attached more to sadness, but truly, anger, if not expressed outwardly, if we hold it inside of ourselves, it creates depression. It and outwardly, I mean, depression, I'm not going to go into. I think you guys all know what depression feels like. Very low energy, futility, absolute hopelessness, despair. This is anger held inside of you. Anger expressed outwardly can be, violence or hate, destruction. So this is throwing chairs or, yelling at people, being very upset and loud and big. So anger is serving outwardly to create space. But the seed that underlies and gives rise to anger is a boundary violation. So boundary violations, we always think of other people violating our boundaries, but oftentimes we violate our own boundaries. And that more or less is what happens when we hold the emotion of anger inside of ourselves. So if we're holding anger inside of ourselves and we're feeling depressed, this is usually because we have violated our own boundaries. Something in our experience has happened which we were not okay with, but we went along with anyways, or didn't express that we weren't okay with. And so since we don't express and we're holding this anger in, we get depressed and we feel existence is futile. If someone outside of us violates our boundaries and we therefore yell and scream at them or separate and create distance, that's reaffirming the boundary that exists. Get away from me, whatever you did, I'm not cool with. So those are the kind of bigger, more negative, lower on the scale emotions. So now we're going to move into the higher emotions, the more pleasant ones, the more positive ones, and we'll start with happiness. So happiness out of emotion expressed inwardly tends to be fullness. It's experienced as fullness. You don't need anything. You're, at the very least, in the moment that you're happy, you're distracted from anything that you felt like you might have needed some other time. You feel like, yeah, I have everything I want. This is great. Outwardly, happiness expresses itself as gratitude, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. You're gracious for all the things that are happening to you. It can also express itself outwardly as confidence. So this is just more or less, if you're feeling happy, you're more interested in engaging with the world. So that naturally kind of produces this feeling of confidence because you're more interested to interact. Whereas if you're feeling insecure, the outside world isn't safe. So happiness naturally gives rise to confidence, but the seed that gives rise to the feeling of happiness is abundance. So it's the opposite of the lack, which is the seed of sadness. The abundance is, again, I have all this, I have all these friends, I have all this love, I have all this connection, I have everything I need. So I am happy. The next one we'll talk about is a little bit more subtle, but it is very positive emotion, and that is the emotion of contentment. So contentment is slightly different than happiness. It's more of like a quiet, less big vibration. It's kind of a more subtle one, but it still feels very good. The inward expression of contentment is acceptance. So you're embracing what is. You accept everything that's happening. Contentment can arise in all different kinds of circumstances, not necessarily just positive, quote unquote, positive ones, but you just feel you're at ease with what's going on. And outwardly, contentment expresses itself as non-attachment, which is kind of similar but slightly different. You're not invested in the goings on around you. Whatever may or may not be happening you're not dependent on it. It's not influencing your state of being if you're in a space of contentment. And the seed that gives rise to contentment is non-resistance. And this is a really important one because the state of non-resistance in general to any emotions can often create this feeling of contentment. A lot of clarity happens in the space of contentment. A lot of empowerment happens in the space of contentment because you're not trying to change anything. You don't need anything to be a certain way or another way. You're just looking at it. You're just okay with it. The next happy emotion I want to talk about is joy. So joy is almost, I feel like, a little bit more full than happiness. Joy tends to express itself inwardly as self love. So this is, I love the way I look. I love the way I talk. I love the way I act. I love who I am. I love my friends. I love my life. It's a little, you could say it's like a self obsession, but it's a healthy thing to have self love. And the outward expression of joy is creation. So when you're in the emotion of joy, you want to give rise to more joy. So you tend to create things, you paint, you play music, or you write, or you want to go hang out with your friends and create happy moments. You feel a little bit more in control of your reality, and you want to paint more joy on your canvas, on the canvas of your life. And the seed that gives rise to joy is vitality. So vitality is like an energy, a very pure, life-giving energy. So because it's life-giving, that energy wants to create when it's expressed outwardly, and it wants to love when is expressed inwardly, because you are creation yourself. And then the last positive emotion that I want to talk about is love. Love has a lot of different associations with it, but the love I'm talking about inwardly, this emotion is expressed as peace. It's a sense of serenity. It's connection to everything. It's non-worry. There's no problem, but it's like a very happy non-worry. And then outwardly, it's expressed as compassion. So this compassion is, I recognize myself as everything and everyone in my reality, and I therefore care about what's happening to the things outside of me. I feel inherently intimate and connected to all of those things. This is compassion, nonviolence. And the seed that gives rise to the experience of love is wholeness, true connection, real authentic connection, and selflessness. Essentially selflessness. You recognize that there is no self, that self is all other. We're all connected, and so there's nothing left to experience but love at that point. And so there's two other emotions that I want to talk about, and this emotion is kind of interesting. It's a fun one because it tends to split in one way or the other based on what the ego's narratives are about it. So the emotion itself is surprise. And I split it up into two because I feel like there's sometimes good surprises, positive surprises, surprises that you embrace and feel great about. And there's negative surprises, surprises that make you feel fearful. So we'll start first with the negative surprise. And I kind of put in quotations under my negative surprise notes. This is the I need to know surprise. Like you have a need to know. And because something happened that you didn't know about, you're like, it's negative. The inward expression of this not embracing surprise is experienced as insecurity. So this is like, I'm not sure about what's happening. I don't know how I feel. I don't know who I am. You don't feel confident. And the outward expression, it can be hopelessness, which is have no control over what's happening. I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. And the seed that gives rise to surprise being experienced as negative is avoidance of true nature. And the reason I say that is because nature itself is constantly changing, its energy constantly changing form. So there is no real fixed reality. There is no real fixed nature of anything. Everything is always constantly moving, changing. And if this is not accepted, if you're avoiding the reality of, or the actuality, I should say, of true nature, you feel insecure and you feel hopeless. You feel like, I don't know what to do about this whole thing, but it's happening anyway. And so the other aspect of surprise, which is positive, is not knowing. So instead of I need to know, it's I don't know. I don't know. And inwardly, the I don't know attitude is expressed as curiosity. Because if you don't know about something, but you're embracing not knowing about it, you're like, huh, I wonder. I wonder what's going on. You're curious. You look at the animals outside, you look at yourself inside, and you want to understand. And it's a playfulness. And then outwardly, this is expressed as hope or faith. So this is like, I don't know, but it's okay. I don't know, but it seems that it all takes care of itself. So it's just it's just an okayness, and it's a playful watching of this changing nature of reality. And the seed that gives rise to the element of surprise, which feels positive or good, is embracing the unknown. And of course, all of these emotions are kind of intertwined and attached to one another, and they're relative points on a scale. But since we're working with the ego in experiential reality, that's what we're all doing, whether we like it or not. Um, the unpleasant emotions tend to be ones that you don't want to stay in for too long. They don't seem to necessarily produce the results that you want. It doesn't feel good to feel insecure and hopeless and, um, anxious and depressed. Those aren't feelings that anybody wants to inhabit for a long time. And you can see the effects on your experiential reality and how that doesn't work out so well for you. So it would serve you well to look at the emotions and recognize where you're at on the scale. The more positive emotions like love and peace and contentment, they create kind of an easiness of flow of life that is more pleasant. There's less resistance there. So, in recognizing that that exists, it is a big leveling up. It's extremely important to be very honest about what the emotions are that you're experiencing. And this whole list that I made of these emotions and how they express themselves is to demonstrate how you can recognize thought patterns and different things that are happening in your life, in your world, that clue you into what emotions you're holding. So once you recognize the emotion is there, that you're holding it or whatever's happening, or that you're repeating a cycle of this emotion, you just face the emotion itself. Like you hear the E minor on the ukulele, you just listen to it. You recognize that you're not it, but it's something that's appearing in your consciousness. And you decide consciously, is this the appearance and experience that I want to have right now, or do I want to have a different experience? In this process, and again, I'll describe a couple techniques in a moment and answer any questions you guys have, but in this process, the ego begins to lose its grip on the narratives that keep you stuck in the cycles. And what happens here is you begin building a bridge, like a thickening of the connection between you and your higher self. You're never disconnected from your higher self or your inner guidance. You're never disconnected from that, but these stories can obscure that connection so that you don't necessarily experience or feel it, and therefore become a victim to what you feel are your circumstances. So this is just giving you a opportunity to look at the emotion directly, to address the emotion directly, and as you're addressing the emotion directly, dissolve the stories around the emotion and see what it's communicating. Like, oh, this is an E minor. Well, I want to hear an A right now. So what do I need to do to make that happen? Some things that are really beneficial to, if you're someone who is in a space where you don't experience any emotion or you don't recognize emotions at all in yourself, a way that you can kind of begin facing because it's fear that is preventing you from experiencing these emotions, a way that you can begin facing them slowly is you can create an emotion journal. So this is a journal that you're going to write in every day. Some people do it like every hour on the hour. It depends on how disassociated you are and how quickly you want to build that bridge of awareness of your emotions. But you just essentially write all your emotions down, anything that you're feeling, any sensations you're having. And because if you're not experiencing the emotion itself, you may just want to write down sensations or thoughts you're having. And then you can look at the thoughts later and go, oh, these are the thoughts of someone who's feeling depression, or these are the thoughts of someone who's feeling angry, or whatever it is. So emotional journals can be really, really helpful, especially in the early stages. Another thing that I always, always, always recommend is meditation. Meditation is by far, I feel like, the best tool for beginning to create space between you and your thought patterns. And this gives you more of an opportunity to get down to the root of where the thought patterns are coming from, which is the emotion itself, and then to begin to look into the seed. So, all of this is kind of a process, but everyone's capable of doing it. And in this practice of doing this, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's incredibly, incredibly valuable and worth it to begin working with your emotions directly rather than allowing yourself to just exist in the thought waves of the emotions, which is an endless vicious cycle that never ends. We begin to take things less personally. So, more or less, we understand the cause and effect nature of emotions themselves. We understand when we hit these chords on the ukulele, it plays an E minor. Like we as, oh, this is this thing that's happening to me, and what do I do? And we just recognize it's cause and effect. This note was played. I'm experiencing this emotion relative to where I want to be. This is where this emotion is. Let me go to that other place. The emotion flows. Your body becomes an instrument that just flows. You can play any emotion you want. You can play any note you want. You can experience any energy that you want. And you pick the ones that are closer on the scale relative to where you want to be. So let's say you want a new job and you're feeling anxious and you're feeling all of these emotions which are lower on the vibrational scale. Obviously, in order to find a new job or have a successful interview, you want to move up the scale towards contentment or confidence at the very least. So you just look at the emotion directly, look at the stories around it. In that, looking at it, it allows those stories to dissolve and you naturally move up. It's like naturally coming up in water, like a balloon in water. You just cut strings. It's like, say this balloon is underwater, it has strings attached to it, and there's stones on all those strings. And looking at the emotion, you cut all the strings, and the balloon just floats up to the top naturally, effortlessly. And you're like, oh, it was just a bunch of stones that I was holding on to. I'm a balloon. It sounds a little trivial, but it is kind of that feeling, and you do laugh at yourself a lot in this process. And I want to reaffirm that looking at the thoughts or becoming lost in the narrative of the thoughts is exhausting. It expends a lot of precious energy that could better be used looking directly at the emotion and the emotion itself. I spent years and years and years getting lost in these cycles of thoughts and just watching the thoughts, and it's like they're endless. They're just going to keep happening if we don't look at the emotion directly. The thoughts will never end. There's no end to them. So it's just kind of like riding a wheel, a circus wheel, over and over and over and over. And time continues on. We just get older. So there's not a lot of point in continuing to spin and spin and spin and spin on the emotions when you can just stop the wheel. And another little I guess like a treat that I like to give myself when I think about this process, which is sometimes uncomfortable of looking directly at the emotion, especially the unpleasant ones, is you begin to feel like your emotions themselves are like a best friend. Like you can even personify your emotions. You have your friend of sadness, your friend of happiness, your friend of anger, your friend of joy. And like a best friend, like any best friend that you would ever imagine yourself to want, these emotions will never lie to you. They will never be dishonest with you. If you look at them directly, they can only be purely what they are. So many of our friends, they're worried about our feelings and they might say something, but maybe they don't tell us the truth, or they say, oh, don't worry about it. Or there's a lot of dynamics that go on, but these emotions are the best friends that will never, ever, ever care to put you in a position that you're not. They're always just going to be straight with you. Like, hey, you're in anger right now. You're experiencing anger right now. Or hey, you're experiencing joy right now. And if you're in one of the lower emotions that feels very negative or unpleasant, if you personify the emotion itself, like let's say anger, as a best friend, and you think, wow, like you're just trying to be honest with me about where I'm at on the scale. You're trying to help me so that I can recognize that I'm here and I want to be here. It it gives you a little, I don't know, like a feeling of being less alone, or a feeling of like, oh, my emotions are helping me. I'm not in this by myself. And getting out of the web of endless thoughts by looking directly at the motion is incredibly empowering. I would almost say that nearly nothing is more empowering than learning to address the emotions directly. So that pretty much concludes everything that I wanted to say about emotions. If any of you have any questions about anything I've said, or you want me to clarify something about the emotion, let me know. You can always just leave it in the comments and I'll respond to you later. I hope you enjoyed this expression of breaking down the emotions. I'm currently writing a book and we'll get more in depth with how these expressions work and leave a roadmap, and it's going to have a journal at the end. So it's a little more interactive. But for now, I think this video might be really helpful. If you liked it or found it helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. I plan to do more live videos about all kinds of different things, maybe diving into each emotion itself a little more, in a little more of a nuanced fashion. Thank you for everyone who attended. I appreciate you guys.